We might as well start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first online chat of the year for TELedvisors. And this is not the usual webinar that we run presentations. This is the first conversation looking at especially the research topics as we talked about in the discussion forum. So we've been given to talk about this research project for the first half an hour, but the last half an hour we're going to talk about different things around the group.
The time frame.
We're getting feedback from people. If you're not talking, maybe you could mute your microphone. Yeah. So for the research chat, this was based on the feedback that we had from the survey we did last year under the Askalites, and some people wanted to see more opportunities around research projects and perhaps the collaboration across institutions. And this is just the first conversation to brainstorm some ideas as to what people are thinking about in terms of how we might collaborate, what sort of research topics we can explore, and what outcomes we might have around that. And yeah, Kate created this Padlet wall. Colin or Wendy, if you want to share the screen, thanks. So as a sort of starting point to capture what we're thinking. And what we wanted to do is to go around and put out their ideas around how we might collaborate and what sort of research topics there are. And Kate already put out most of the ideas that came out in the discussion forum and people's names attached to them. So perhaps one of the group members can talk to some of the ideas that they've got. And then we might talk about some of the goals. And I put down there as an idea for maybe something like submission for Askalite 2018. It's in Geelong at Deakin this year, and one of the great experiences that I had with Colin and Kate was last year to work on Askalite paper and concise paper that we did. It was 5 pages long, and we had an outcome of having a publication together, and it was really good to do that as a learning opportunity for ourselves, and also some contribution back to the group as well, because we're looking at the third space, which is really close to Colin's research area. So that's just an idea, and then we might talk about some of the next steps forward, because we only got half an hour to talk about this as a starting point. So I'm just gonna throw the floor over to any of you who might have some ideas around how you imagined the collaboration may work in terms of conducting research. Is there anyone who has certain ideas about how we might do this, what you would like to see?
Kate, sorry, Chair, Wendy here. Just if there's anybody maybe from the groups, if we just name them from the top down. So if Tanya's here from Learning Spaces, or so the next one is Third Space Identity and Practice. If somebody wants to talk about that.
I guess I'm happy to talk about this one. We've got a few of us here as well. So if I miss something or if you've got something to add, please feel free to speak up. I've got a particular interest in this, look, firstly because of my own research, but secondly, it was kind of one of the things that I thought was really important when we set up TELedvisors in the first place, which is about the way that we sort of, or this, where we kind of exist within the tertiary education sector, and what we can do to, you know, kind of raise understanding of what we do and hopefully get us a little bit more of a voice and help us have a little bit more impact. So I think that there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of trying to clarify our definitions of who we are, look at the relationships that we have with academics and with institutional management and presumably other stakeholders. And there's, I mean, look, there's some stuff out there in the literature. There's talk about professionalisation, and I think that's a really big, meaty, interesting question. So do we want to have, you know, and there are kind of some qualifications or accreditation out there, but do we want to look at how do we say, yes, this person is an advisor and they know their shit? I don't know how we proceed with that, but I'm certainly interested in working with the group in that space. Anyone else from, does anyone else with an interest in this want to speak up?
Meg, you might want to add something to this space also.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I was thinking another angle besides professionalisation could be identity, like own professional identities. So there is an opportunity if it would take an ethics application, so I don't know whether it'd be timely enough to do everything before Escalate this year, but professional identities and actually get, so the great presentation of the three of you at the Escalate conference just gone really lends itself to that. Now go and talk to people in the roles and getting some detail on their professional identities and how they see themselves, and then see how it matches to the literature. Unless you did a bit of that, I can't remember. I think you did more literary review. Would that be right?
Mainly, and we also started looking at, well, I think looking at job ads and position descriptions is quite valuable as well, because it's how the institution defines what it is that we do. But yeah, I think talking about how we define what we do is also really interesting.
Yes, it gives it gives another place, and then it lends itself for another place beyond that, and how it matches to the professionalisation options and things like that. So perhaps with a time span thing, given Escalate's, this year now, the next one. Perhaps professionalisation and what's available, as Colin said, with the Quals, the accreditation options and things like that. The CMALT, it comes to mind. I'm not familiar with so many others, except for there's a range of professional quals, as we know from the, one of the discussion forums that was actively running as well. People were offering who's doing what at what university as far as qualifications. So there's meat there that can be delved into, and then if in the meantime, a research project could be designed to involve the voice of TELedvisors and get once the design's done, get the ethics in, and then you're looking at either a journal or next year's Escalate.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do need to think about if we were to engage with subsequent research projects like this is, methodologies and how we go about getting ethics across institutions and so forth. So I'm hoping that these conversations would come about once we form groups, and then these groups can take further to talk about these kind of things into the future. But we might not have time to go into the details of those kind of things today, because we wanted to cover different people's ideas just as a brainstorming session today. So thanks for that, Colin and Meg, for topic around third space, practice and identity. Maybe you've got digital video in learning as well as a topic. Did you want to briefly speak to that and see if there's anyone else from this room also that might be interested?
Just before you do, Chair, can you hear me?
Yeah, Hank.
Oh, sorry, yes. No, I was just going to say, in terms of ethics with these kinds of projects, there are quite a lot of precedents with OLT projects that have ethics approval across different institutions. And it usually just means that you have to have a lead institution, and the others can then piggyback on that. I'm just going to mention that.
Yeah, so you can also
Right.
just put it through one university. With a project like you just described, I've done things like that where I've put it through Deakin, but we've had collaborators from other universities, and that's totally fine. You only need multi-institution where you want to draw on their resources, like students, for example. Then you would need ethics across, and it becomes more complicated.
That's right.
Thanks, Trina. Meg, digital video in learning.
Sorry, that was my cue. Yeah, look, because I think I was the only one that said that, maybe I won't take up a lot of space with that. It's something, I mean, I've been, people are sick of me talking about video, I've been doing it for years, and you'd think there'd be nothing else to find out, but there is. I don't think we are. In fact, video is just an example of a media / technology that in higher education we haven't adopted as wholesomely, not wholesomely, as wholly as we might do in industry. We have yet to learn more about practices and things in these areas. And I'm doing my PhD in teachers' practices, university teachers' practices in leveraging video as a tool to foster student learning. So, which is, sounds boring to most people, but I'm finding it terribly exciting.
Meg,
yeah.
I just had a comment there. It's Wendy here. Maybe there's some crossover with the multimodality conversation. In the work that I'm doing, I'm looking at multimodality for assessment, and that would include the students creating videos. Is that something that you're looking at?
I'm not, because my supervisor said I was only allowed to do one PhD and I wasn't allowed to do as big. So I actually had, my original design was, had 3 components: teachers who create their own videos and use them in research, teachers who use third-party, teachers who use third-party video in their teaching and learning, and teachers who design their curriculum for the students to create videos. And I had to pair that right back. So Wendy, I've definitely got an interest in that, and apparently I've got to put that off to my postdoctoral time, but certainly I don't mind pursuing a little bit of that in the meantime.
So with one of the aspects of the research that I'm looking at is the lecturer putting up video feedback on assessments. Would that fit into one of those boxes?
It would, because it actually comes back to my core business, if you like, because I really like to look at teachers' practice in these things. So teachers giving video feedback, and I mean, I got video feedback during my masters on my thesis. So my minor thesis. So I really appreciated that from a personal positionality point. But yeah, I'm happy to talk further with you at some stage on that, Wendy.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, we'll hook up somehow.
And Wendy, do you want to expand at all on the topic that you were talking about around multimodality in assessment?
Yeah, so the progress that I've had there is that I've been accepted into the Ascolite Community Mentoring Program, and my main aim is to do research on VoiceThread, using VoiceThread in assessment. So I'm thinking that as we're talking, it would be an idea to somehow get our abstracts or our brief, sort of what we're working on. We've got sort of headings in the Padlet, so maybe like I could add a comment that just explained the research question, for example. So at this stage, I'm aiming to do the research in Higher Ed Semester 1, and I'm working with Associate Professor Pedro Isaias in University of Queensland. and he's done some really interesting work in emphatic, looking at research of how using technology tools, whether students are happy or not so happy to do that. So yeah, that's what I'm aiming to do, is to do a research paper. Now at this stage it's just for Charles Darwin University for a case study there. I'd love to go across institution, but I just don't know of anybody else who's using VoiceThread in higher ed. So if there's anybody here, then I'll update the Padlet as well for a bit more information there.
Sounds good. I think that would be good if you could, Wendy, so people who couldn't come today might have a look at it and then put their hands up in talking to you. One of the ways in which we're thinking people could collaborate through this is to have people talking about this research topics, and some of them might have more experiences around conducting formal research, who then could potentially work as critical friends. So even if they're not actually doing the research together to have the outcome or papers together, some of the people might be able to work as critical friends in looking at people's work and providing feedback, and vice versa. So I'm thinking people like Meg, you and Wendy, you can hook up another time and have a look at the kind of stuff that you're doing and give each other feedback. Not to pursue research projects together, but sometimes support each other that way also.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good, Chia. While the Ascolite CMP is a formal mentoring process where you have, you know, like a signed agreement and you have goals and checkpoints and stuff, it'd be really nice to have, you know, sort of that informal mentoring and critical friends, particularly as we've previously mentioned just today about the professional, you know, like an academic role versus a general role. So my position being a Hugh position, I have to, it's a bit trickier to do research because research is not part of my role. So even those sort of conversations, it'd be good to go cross section.
Really good point, Wendy. And we had some conversations around this with various people, and it always comes up as a sort of tension, if you like, between academic and professional staff roles. And as you said, Wendy, professional staff members need to get more sort of buy-in from the supervisors to even find the time and ways to do research. So this conversation is also great in terms of talking about the kind of challenges that we are facing and how we can help each other. And I believe that this TELedvisor group is for that kind of conversations in space. So let's keep that conversation going. Moving on to the next research topic, authentic learning and assessment. I saw quite a few people put their hands up and saying they're interested. Is anyone from this group like to talk to this item? I'm looking at Hank, Kylie, Hazel, and Trina. Hazel is not here, but the rest of the members are here, including myself. Anyone?
Well, yeah, I can talk. I don't really have a lot in mind, but I guess for me, doing research that ties in with what I need to do as part of my role works, and I think I'm going to be working in this space. So I think, yeah, I think so. On what you were saying before, I think that's another thing, especially if you're in a huge position. But regardless of whether your academic is thinking about not just what you're interested in terms of research, but also what you can actually show as a value to your institution and where they're trying to go.
I'm a bit the same, Gia, but I don't really have any well-formed ideas around this yet. But the kind of broad area of authentic learning and assessment is kind of what I have to do for work anyway. It also it links in with stuff I've done about problem-based learning and work-integrated learning and what that looks like in an online space. So that's kind of broadly where I'm coming from.
Yeah, so for me, it's often around employability, work-integrated learning. I'm certainly interested in looking at authentic assessment that can be delivered online. as well, especially if it's related to work integrated learning.
For sure. Go on, Carly.
Yeah, thanks, Gia. That's encouragement. So I just thought I'd tell people what I have been working on up until now, because I'm more than happy to widen out the research that I've been doing. So I submitted a paper yesterday, who knows if it gets accepted, on group video feedback on assessments, so the kind of fine line between summative and formative feedback. I've also done some work on flipping classrooms and how to make that feel like the sort of live environment, which is kind of being written up. And the other area, so for no one here knows me apart from Chia, but I work in a design department, so I'm exposed to pedagogical practice in a studio-based environment, and so I'm interested in looking at how we can use some of those models of learning into wider faculties and larger cohorts.
Really good one, Kaidi. Just to give a bit more context around what Kaidi does. So she's in the Department of Design, as you mentioned, at Monash University. And I think what she's doing is really interesting in terms of bringing design thinking, things that are not initially thought as learning and teaching approaches, but incorporating different ideas to solve problems. So in this area of authentic learning and assessment, what you're bringing, Kaide, is going to be really interesting. And also to add to this, it's interesting how the term authentic assessment is kind of coming up as a term around the uni at Deakin, and also sounds like it at QUT, Hank. And it's definitely some of the focused areas at different universities at the moment. So potentially there are lots of directions that we can take this into. Maybe what we could do is to have another catch-up around this topic as a separate topic for online catch-up for the TELedvisors. And maybe not only as an angle for research project, but also together what's happening in institutions around this area. Because as Hank and Trina mentioned, a lot of us who are working in the academic development area are working on how we can transform assessment and learning and teaching practice.
I think that's a good idea, Chair. But the other thing about that is that there's quite a lot of there are quite a wide range of different ideas about what authentic assessment actually is, or what it should look like. So
yeah, exactly. So it might be interesting to get together and just talk about that. What do we mean by authentic assessment or learning at different institutions or in different areas? Cool. Anything more on this topic from anyone? Right. Shall we move on to digital literacy? This is something really close to my research interest, but Wendy, did you want to share your idea before I go ahead and do that?
So I just put that anonymous comment in there before I was logged into Padlet. There's Digital Literacy Day on February the 22nd, and this is something that I wanted to do within CDU, but there's been the usual sort of blank silence about that. So there's actually a program, so I'm happy to share all this information afterwards, but there's a program from a university in Ireland that have done this great website that you can get on and do your digital literacy profile. So my idea for DL Day was that either we get TELedvisors or we get TELedvisors to ask their staff to do their own digital literacy profile and to share that somehow. So that's just an idea if people want to get involved and as TELedvisors to do something for DL Day. And more broadly, basically digital literacy is a lot of my work in supporting academics in creating stuff for online learning. So I'm just really interested in how we improve digital literacy for academics so that they can actually portray their ideas for teaching into the online space.
Sounds great, Wendy. And it's a really interesting one, I think, also because you can take digital literacy from different angle, and you're taking it from the perspective of staff's capability in being able to do interesting things with digital. So my angle is similar to that in terms of looking at academics' perception of digital literacy, but my specific angle is around digital literacy as a learning outcome. So how academics perceive this notion as a learning outcome to be able to teach and assess that as part of the graduate learning outcome or attributes. So I had a research grant last year from Faculty of Arts Ed to do this small scale project in looking at this. And we had data collected in talking to academics across the university, but in particular bringing the framework of activity theory. So change laboratory within activity theory as a method to do this project. So what it means is to bring different types of people in the room, and we do have sessions in talking about this across different times. Meg knows this method as well, I know, and share knowledge and essentially bring transformation to change practice around certain concepts. So I had those sessions 4 times last year, and I'm in the phase of analyzing the conversations that happened within it. And
yeah, that's really interesting, Chia. So I'd see this DL Day activity as a side project. So to raise awareness of everybody on this call, everybody in TELedvisors, to raise your own awareness of digital literacy, because the website shows you like 5 different areas of literacy and what that actually means. So it's quite detailed. And while we all hope that we're, you know, super intelligent as far as technology goes, there's sort of more aspects to it than that. So yeah, it sounds I'm very interested in what you're doing there, Chia.
Thanks, Wendy. And exactly, there's so many frameworks around digital literacies as well, and it really depends on what institutions are trying to incorporate. And if you ask different academics, they all come up with different definitions of what they understand as digital literacy. So my research project also looks at that. Cool. If there's anyone else interested in this area, put your name down there, and then maybe we can have a further chat around that into the future.
I just wanted to hello, hi everybody, it's Kate.
Hi, Kate.
I just wanted to raise that kind of in some ways ties in a little bit with the TELedvisors identities stuff as well, in that I mean, obviously what Wendy's saying about our own digital literacy, but on the other side around academics digital literacy, there's kind of there's probably more than 2 camps, but I guess I'm thinking about that we often talk about staff's digital literacy in terms of them having to produce blended or online courses, but we haven't really talked about the digital literacy as far as a vernacular for engaging with us as TELedvisors, and in that sense about the fact that unis have kind of, and institutions have often traditionally taken the route of staff are expected to do everything themselves, and that's kind of shifted a little bit more lately to actually, no, we need specialised people to do this work, and that's where, you know, I feel quite lucky to be in the kind of role I'm in now, and that's getting some recognition. And so I guess that debate around, well, do we, you know, is it that staff should do everything themselves, in which case they need one set of digital literacies, versus, you know, working with other teams who are maybe more specialised to maybe do a more collaborative work, or, you know, be able to negotiate those spaces so that they can get what they want out of a design while, you know, not necessarily doing the work. And so I think that could be an interesting space as well.
Oh, I agree. That's a really good point, Kate. Often, I think academics also see us as a way of building their capacity around digital literacy in engaging with edutech as well. So that could be a really interesting angle to pursue.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
And it would be good to kind of note that maybe the digital literacy frameworks that are around don't necessarily accurately show the full range of digital literacies that might be needed by academic staff in that sense.
Cool. Just to move on to the next one, because I know that we said first half an hour was spent on this research project topics, and then we'll move on to other ones. Vibeke, do you want to talk about learning analytics as a research topic?
Yes, I'll give it a little spiel. So like a lot of the other topics, I don't have necessarily a firm area that I'd want to be looking at. I just find learning analytics very interesting. I suppose some of the areas that within it that I've been interested in the research around is often learning analytics systems in universities seem to be implemented and the decisions made around them based on, say, the needs of management in terms of student retention and oversight. And I suppose I'm quite interested in projects in which the users, as in academics, educational designers and students, are involved. And there's been studies around students' perspectives of learning analytics, and a little bit I've found around some instructors, you know, interviewed, but largely the academic voice and the educational designer voice is missing. So I suppose the area that I'm interested in is academic and educational design staff perceptions and attitudes in relation to learning analytics, and also anything else to do with learning analytics, because it's all very exciting. So that's all from me, really.
Cool. Is there anyone else from this group that would be interested in looking at learning analytics as a potential topic? Hank, maybe?
Yes, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I'm quite interested in that. I've also been involved in a project around this, which has very similar, which had a very similar focus. Like it was about you know, organizational dissemination of and use of analytics and the difficulties between different areas of organizations and getting the most out of analytics. So yes, I'm kind of interested in this. I will put my name into this group as well.
Colin just did that for you, Hank. But what about the element around perceptions of academics and designers on the learning analytics? Vibeke, you mentioned that there's not much being talked about in this space, but I feel like we're always talking about sort of the kind of data we need to be looking at in enhancing our practice to improve students' learning experiences and outcomes. But it's interesting to hear that perspective as well.
Oh yeah, I wasn't meaning necessarily that educational design staff and academics aren't talking about learning analytics, more that the research and literature out there hasn't really focused on their perspectives. The perspectives have, you know, the decision making around let's get this tool, or let's make this tool, or let's implement this repository often comes from above, just from reading. But again, I'm happy to be told otherwise. That's great.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hype about this learning analytics and big data, but my personal reflection was that perhaps people could be asking different questions to see what kind of data we need, and therefore we don't just go with the huge amount of data coming in, but we know exactly what we're looking for when we engage with numbers and data. But that's just my reflection. And yeah, I'll be happy to be told otherwise and have a further conversation around that. So just to wrap up this conversation around research projects moving forward, we've got some really good ideas listed here, and what we would ask from here on is for you to leave any comments and feedback on this Padlet, and perhaps regroup with different research topics to have further conversations into the future, and then maybe look at what kind of outcomes or goals we may have into the future. Is there anything else that any of you would like to add before we wrap up this conversation about research projects?
I just had one quick thought, which is not a wholly formed idea, but maybe just something for us to consider, is maybe it could be actually quite valuable if in some way TELedvisors as a group was identified as being involved in the publication or the conduct of this research as well. So you were talking about we need to get ethics from our host universities or whatever. Presumably there are, there are quite a few of us who aren't at universities at all. But is there a way that we can say this is a TELedvisors research project as much as it's a Deakin Swinburne CDU joint collaboration? We don't necessarily need to answer this question. I guess I just wanted it to be out there in the ether for people to think about.
Interesting one, Colleen. Is there anyone who would like to add to this idea conversation?
It's Wendy here. I just think that it would be great if there was some way of referencing TELedvisors as a entity for research purposes, so that I could say, oh, I'm doing the research because I'm part of TELedvisors, not because I'm part of CDU and I have a Hugh position and I need a critical academic friend. That'd be great, but we could try and work on it.
Yeah, I think so too. There is an element where you can recognize different peoples in acknowledgement and contributions. So maybe that's one way to acknowledge group like TELedvisor. But also I think that it doesn't really hurt to recognize your own institutions where you work as well. So yeah, there are different ways of addressing this, I suppose.
Yeah, but given that it doesn't always work the other way. If the institution you're working for is not particularly interested in the research that you're doing or the research area that you're passionate about, then you need to go to other areas. So that's one of the reasons why I've gone to Ascolite mentoring program, because it gives some validity and verification to the stuff that I'm interested in.
Sure. And if TELedvisors can work in this space, providing that sort of scope for people, then that's a beautiful thing. And that's one of the aims, I suppose, that we had under this group.